everybody, welcome back to the RFL podcast, and we are in the playoffs. It's been the long-awaited part of the season, but we are finally here. We have had some wildcard games happen, and of course we're going to talk about those results, what it means, and what that brings in terms of the divisional matchups. And of course today I have Wobbegong back on the show. Great to have you back. It's playoff time, and you're in it, and I'm not, so how are you feeling?
Excited, especially after a very important wildcard win against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We already talked about the Steelers. I already mentioned them, that they had a great turnaround, awesome season, and what a defensive game. We will talk about that in a second. But yeah, I made it. I'm in the divisional round, so will be very exciting to talk about these games.
Yeah, absolutely, and there was both really interesting games for different reasons that we'll talk about in a moment. But of course, we also have the divisional matchups, which are going to be really entertaining. So should we dive straight in? Then you mentioned obviously your wildcard matchup against the Steelers, who have had a really good season as well. And well, it was a bit of a defensive battle to say the least, wasn't it?
Yeah, both teams really good on defense. If we look at sack leaders over the season, 3 out of the top 4 are from Steelers and Bills. So great defensive line for both teams, and that's in the end what was the story of the game. Dan Hampton for the Steelers with 2 sacks, 5 hurries, 2 knockdowns. So he had a really good game. And also in addition, Jacob Green on the other side, very important for the Steelers with another couple of sacks and 1 hurry, also a forced fumble. So very important for turnover and battles. And same on Bills. Normally we would talk about Gastineau. He usually records at least a couple of sacks per game, but he got injured very early in the game against the Steelers and is out for the season. That will be a very important storyline when we talk about the divisional games. But other players stepped up, backup linebackers like Robin Cole or Michael Jackson had 1 sack each. So a lot of defensive plays. And in the end, my Buffalo Bills were able to win 10-9 because of the only touchdown that happened in the second quarter. Tony Nathan, a great runner for the Buffalo Bills, was able to get it done. When we look at total yards, of course, Bills look good with 319 yards, but in the end, not able to score that many points. So it was a close game, could have gone either way, especially looking at the comeback. The Steelers were the only team that either scored in the second half. So they had a chance to also get into the lead with a field goal. In the end, the Bills got a little bit lucky and got the stop, and now are in the divisional round. So I think if you can take anything out of this game, is that the Bills defense looks good. Offense definitely needs to step up when we want to have a chance against the Patriots.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a defensive juggernaut by both teams, given the scoreline and given, as you mentioned there, some of the interesting sort of performances that stand out. I mean, I guess reflecting, I'll obviously ask your reflections of the Bills in a minute, but I'm just going to try and reflect on it from a Steelers perspective. And it's an aging team, but the only thing I'd be thinking there, sitting, is that the real thing that let them down in this one was their passing game. Their passing game was well below their season average. Averaging about 3.9 yards per attempt. And maybe the running game kind of kept them in it, but that 1 touchdown, you're always wondering when you have sort of those tough defensive games whether it was the defense that was just too elite or whether it was a case that the offense didn't really show up on the day. But I'm the Steelers GM. I'm sort of sitting there thinking maybe we could have got a bit more, just a little bit more production out of Bradshaw, and maybe this result would have gone the other way. But having said that, thinking about the Steelers at the beginning of the season, we kind of said, would this be a season where they take a step back and don't look like a good playoff team? And well, I mean, they've proved a lot of people wrong, I think, in that respect. And would have the same questions for them this off-season. I'm no doubt about that, given the age of the team. But they really did put up a good fight against the current Super Bowl champions and certainly one of the contenders, in my opinion, in the Bills. So that's the Steelers' perspective. Wobbegong, how do you feel about it from the Bills' perspective?
Yeah, you mentioned the pass defense, and the Bills definitely improved in that area. The linebackers stepped up to get a couple of passes deflected, but also when we look at the cornerbacks, we have Raymond Claiborne, corner 100 overall, arguably the best cornerback in the league. And then you look at the second corner, and you have Hanford Dixon, former top 10 pick, 7th overall, just a few seasons back in 1981. 89 overall, also good agility, good speed. So two really good corners, and the linebackers were able to get it done. So I'm really happy to see that the pass defense stepped up. When we look at Bill's stats, normally we have the best rushing defense in the league, which is, I think, very important in this era. And when we look at yards for pass, yeah, we're not that good, but in the end, we don't get that many points against us. So we allow a few yards when opposing quarterbacks throw the ball, but we don't let them score. And I think the bend but don't break approach is very important. So very proud of the defense, and also last year defense was the key factor to win the games, and definitely needs to be a key factor against the Patriots, who have one of the best offenses in the league. So it's nice to see that the defense stepped up. And yeah, a key goal for the Bills will be to get the third edge rusher into the rotation and replacing Mark Gastineau as edge number 2 in this case. So hopefully the Bills will be able to still have some pass rush going against the Patriots. But yeah, definitely we need to talk about the offense. And Cliff Stout, the quarterback, has some of these games where he's just not able to get it done. 40% completion rate is not the best for him. He had a really, really good season, only one interception with 29 touchdowns, but still 55% completion percentage is the worst percentage in the last 5 years. And that is definitely far away from being in Super Bowl contender form. He needs to step up his game. Not every game there is a Tony Nathan who can get it done and rush for over 5 yards per average and get a few touchdowns. So we need the passing game back on elite level. Otherwise, the Bills don't have any chance at all next round.
Yeah, we'll talk about the divisional matchup for the Bills in a moment, but I mean, we jump over from a really close defensive matchup to be frank, the complete opposite happened in the St. Louis New York game. Absolutely incredible offensive performance by both teams, really, in that respect. But obviously we could talk about the Cardinals coming out and winning it by 2 points, but it was a heartbreaking one from Giants' perspective. 6 seconds left on the clock or so, and they have the opportunity to tie the game, and unfortunately don't manage to complete the 2-point conversion to kind of get themselves back in it. But just to give our viewers a bit of a understanding of this game, I mean, it really did swing quarter to quarter. The Cardinals were up 21-0 in the first quarter, then failed to score in the second quarter, which gave the Giants a bit of an opportunity to come back in, putting up 10 points themselves. Before a sort of mixed bag third quarter, and then the Giants really went on a rampage in the fourth, putting up 12 points. But just unfortunately, that first quarter showing by the Cardinals meant that the Giants didn't manage to get through. But from the Cardinals' perspective, Montana, Payton were just incredible. To be frank, Montana didn't necessarily need to throw the ball too much, but he was very efficient with what he did. Getting just 94 passing yards, but 9 of 13 completions. But Payton with 146 yards on 32 attempts was the main driving force from the offensive perspective for them. What's your reflections on this one then? I mean, complete opposite to your wildcard game in that respect.
Yeah, definitely. And it also shows that total yards is not everything. The Giants have 415 yards, the Cardinals 264. So that's a huge difference. But still, the Cardinals were able to get it done. And that's also the story of the game: minimize mistakes. We have 4 fumbles by the Giants, 2 lost. The Cardinals have 3 fumbles, 2 lost. But in addition to that, Neil Lomax, quarterback of the Giants, also threw 2 interceptions. So the mistakes in the end were the key factor that cost the Giants the win. And of course, we have to talk about Walter Payton. He was again a big factor, but also it's a story for opposing teams that they cannot just focus on the rush and try to stop Payton, because Montana, 13 attempts, 9 completions, and out of the 9 completions, 3 touchdowns. So this combination of quarterback and running back is really, really important. But again, we will talk about the divisional round. The Cardinals need to get better on defense, and that's also something I guess we talked about when we talked about the NFC East a few episodes back. The Cardinals definitely need to step up their defensive game, otherwise it will be a very, very tough matchup. But yeah, both offenses were really, really good. So yeah, as you said, quite the opposite of the other wildcard game.
Yeah, I mean, it really, really was. I mean, we're just watching the replay now on the screen of the fourth quarter madness here. I mean, heartbreak for the Giants. Cardinals, fantastic offensive sort of showing, as you said. There isn't a better duo in the league, I don't think, in terms of Peyton and Montana. But I guess we'll talk about the Cardinals a little bit later with the divisional matchup. But from the Giants' perspective, really, really tough division to even come out of in a wild card slot this year. They obviously had a bit of a down year last year, really fantastic year the season before. Do you think this is growing pains from the Giants' perspective, or is it a case of they're just surrounded by just so many good teams now?
Yeah, I think they have a really, really good roster, but also a really, really tough division. When we look at the roster, they have so many good and young players. So the best oldest player is an O-liner. So Big Joe still has a few years left, but Mike Singletary, arguably one of the best linebackers in the league, only 24 years old. He's incredible. Also, their star on defense next to Singletary, Howie Long, 23 years old. So they have so many good pieces on defense and also on offense. So maybe they get a little bit more aggressive this offseason, try to get maybe another playmaker in there. I think that could be a good possibility for them to really get the edge and hopefully kickstart for the new year to maybe win the division next year. I think they have a realistic shot. They have a young team, quality roster, and a great season after, if I remember correctly, a not so good season before that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, going to be tough. Going to be interesting to see what the Giants do this offseason, certainly. They're in a good position, but are they going to be trying to get those additional players to kind of go that hump over next year to really just win the division outright and not have to have one of the really tough wildcard game, basically? So that brings us to sort of the divisional matchups. But first of all, I think it's worth us just saying, Steelers and Giants, fantastic showing this season. Cementing themselves in terms of getting back into the playoffs or continuing that wild card slot. So, really well done to both of them. It's just that's the way the playoffs roll sometimes, is you do have some really tough matchups. And talking of tough matchups, we have some absolutely stonking playoff games ahead of us this next sim. So just to give everyone a bit of a flavour of it on the screen here, we have St. Louis against New Orleans, Minnesota against Dallas, Buffalo against New England, and Oakland against Cincinnati. Wobbegong, where would you like to take the divisional matchups first?
I mean, we just talked about Giants and Cardinals, so let's talk about Cardinals and Saints. One thing to mention, the Saints are 3-1 against the Cardinals in previous records, so slight edge for the Saints. And when we look at both teams, I think we could get a high-scoring game because both offenses are on fire and rather have mid-tier defenses. So when we look at the Cardinals, of course, we talked a lot about Montana and Peyton, and I don't think there's too much to mention there. The key topic for the Saints, or the key challenge, will be to stop the rushing game while also accounting for the passing game. And looking at the Saints defense, they have the 20th best rushing defense, 24th best passing defense in terms of yards. When we look at points scored, it's middle of the league, place 14. So Yeah, I think the Cardinals will get some points. The question is, will it be enough? Because the Saints, on the other hand, have the fourth best offense, and especially the passing game looks good. And that's because of Steve Fuller, the quarterback, 80 overall, 83 accuracy. He's really, really good. And that shows, especially in his stats, 80% completion percentage over the whole season. I don't remember uh, that I've seen that ever by any quarterback. That's really impressive. 2,790 yards, a quarterback rating of 131, 21 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. He is Mr. Reliable. And when we looked at the wildcard game, the Cardinals won because Neil Lomax did 2 costly mistakes. Fuller did that 2 mistakes over the whole season. So he's really, really reliable, and it will be a very tough challenge for the Cardinals to stop him. And I think the chance that the Cardinals have is maybe force a couple of turnovers. And if they get Fuller to throw an interception, then the Cardinals might have a chance. I think it will be a very, very high scoring game.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with you in terms of high scoring game. I think this could be another, all guns to the wall, see what comes out on top in terms of just points on the board, really. Yeah, I mean, that Fuller's had a fantastic season. I'm not going to repeat exactly what you said there, but it's also worth noting that in terms of the receiving call that the Saints have had, it's not only just been Fuller on the positive end of this, but obviously we can talk about Jefferson, the pickup there. He's number 9 ranked in receiving this year. Christensen, the tight end, number 7 in receiving. So they've those guys have definitely benefited from Fuller's performance, and the Saints have rocketed up the league in terms of, we talked about at the beginning of the season being a contender. I mean, they are a now on really, really difficult team to try and beat now. Their performances have been exemplary, really. So work cut out for St. Louis, I think. But if there's any 2 players who can beat the Saints in a one-off game where it is all about offense, it is Joe Montana and Walter Payton. So, I mean, I personally, I still think the Saints will come out on top, but I think this could be like another 30-plus point difference in terms of game. Both teams putting up lots and lots of numbers, and it's just been an absolute incredible game from an offensive spectacle, I think, is what we're going to see with this one. But what about your views on this? Do you think the Saints are still going to come out on top, or do you think the Cardinals might just do it in a one-off?
Yeah, I think you have to believe in the Saints after this impressive regular season, and Steve Fuller. I think you have to have him as the favorites. For me, it says the game has a line at the Saints at -7.5. With that, I would take the Cardinals. I think it will be closer than a touchdown, but you never know. I think in the end, the Saints will win, but I could see that both teams score more than 25 or even 30 points. But yeah, I agree. You have to go with the Saints. It will be a tough matchup, but I think in the end, the regular season, or the really good regular season, was there for a reason. The Saints are for real.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that would worry me from a Saints perspective is if Peyton just starts to just abuse that defense, basically. Then that could turn on its head, possibly. But Saints have got enough ammo in the locker, I think, to go past St. Louis in this one. But going to be an interesting one to watch, no doubt about that. Let's jump ourselves over to the other matchup in the NFC, which is Minnesota against Dallas. Wobbegong, what's your take on this one?
I mean, another great storyline, because here we have strength versus strength. Talking about the Cowboys, they have the best offense in the league, second best in yards, second best in passing yards, and also nearly top 10 rushing offense. But 34 points per game is really impressive. Warren Moon, great quarterback for them. 0 interceptions this year, 30 touchdowns, and a completion percentage of just over 70. Really good quarterback rating. He is impressive. And not only that, there we have the only combination that could get close to Montana and Peyton, I would say, in Warren Moon and Tony Dorsett. Awesome running back who had also an impressive season with 28 touchdowns. and 2,300 yards rushing. And in addition to that, we have 500 receiving yards, 518 to be precise, and 3 touchdowns. So this is another really, really good weapon. But on the other hand, we have the Vikings with the third best defense in the league, top 6 passing defense, top 3 rushing defense, and the best defense in terms of yards allowed. So I think it could get really close, and it will be very, very fun to especially watch that side of the ball when the Cowboys are on offense and playing the awesome Minnesota Vikings defense.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, the interesting thing about this one was their previous matchup was a 41-38 win to the Cowboys, I believe. So this last time these two played, it was a really high scoring game, and I think from a Dallas perspective, they will certainly favour that. I think from Minnesota's perspective, they've got to try and rein in that Cowboys offense. If they can get them into touching distance there, that might give them just enough from their offensive, their dynamic offense that they've had this season to kind of get themselves over the edge. We've got the number 3 in passing yards against number 2 in passing yards, number 1 in rushing yards against number 5 in rushing yards. I mean, Dorset MVP candidate, no doubt about that, in my opinion. So I think that the Cowboys are going to have too much for the Vikings. I think it's going to be really, really difficult for the Vikings to pull this one out of the bag. But, that being said, my NFC dark horse is the Vikings. I think they are playing very, very well and have probably been a little bit underrated this season, I think, just given how weak their division has been in general. But do you see the Cowboys edging this one out as well, or do you think the Vikings could surprise some people?
The Cowboys' record against the Vikings is 5-0, so it will be a big surprise if the Vikings win it. They have the ammunition to do that. But looking at injuries, Wade Wilson, the quarterback, is probable with an injury, but not sure if it affects him. Also, Van McElroy, star free safety for the Vikings, again probable. And starting tackle Keith Farnhorst will be out for the game. So I think this, in the end, could be the deciding factor. Although I really would like to pick the Vikings, the Cowboys are impressive. They're really strong, and there's no reason to bet against them as of right now. I think the Cowboys will win it, but I wouldn't be too much surprised if the Vikings pull off a win if it's a defensive game like the AFC wildcard.
Yeah, and I mean the game line kind of shows that thinks it's going to be a close one, in that the Dallas are only 3.5 ahead in terms of that one. So yeah, I think we're both saying Cowboys, but could be a closer one than I think people are expecting. Let's jump our attention over to the AFC. I mean, I'm going to talk about Buffalo, New England at the end, just to save you for that one. But let's turn our attention over to the Raiders and the Bengals. Both had really, really good seasons. Lots of different reasons really, but DeBerg looks really, really strong again. On the other side, the Raiders just continued to sort of really put up really decent numbers. Williams has looked really good as usual, and we're going to be in for an interesting one with this one, given that both teams are pretty much I would say pretty equal in most respects. I think the only thing that would give them the edge is how well the Bengals' defense has been this year. But that was said, the Raiders have been respectable on that side as well. Particularly their pass defense has been the best in the league. So, I mean, I think we've got two very, very evenly matched teams in this one. And given that the line is -4.5 for Cincinnati in the game, kind of respects that as well. I don't know how to call this one, to be honest with you, Wobbegong. Any way we can try and break this down a little bit to try and give us an idea of where we think our head might be with this divisional game?
It's a tough game because, as you said, both teams are really well-rounded, highlighting, of course, the Raiders' pass defense. And Steve DeBerg, on the other hand, quarterback for the Bengals, had a good season with 17 touchdowns and 1 interception in 11 games. So he missed a few ones due to injury. but is ready to go for this game. But I think that could be a key factor, especially when we look at the run game. It's not that great. The Bengals have the 23rd best rushing offense, with Charles Alexander being the leading back. He has a 4.7 average, 800 yards. I think they have a shared backfield, but yeah, it will be heavily reliant on whether Steve DeBerg will be able to get past this pass defense of the Raiders. But on the other hand, the Bengals, with an incredible defense, second best in points allowed, third best in yards allowed, and both rushing and passing, it's a top 10 defense. And they play against the top 10 offense in the Raiders. So they played not against each other this season. The Bengals have a 2-1 record against the Raiders. It's really a toss up for me. And I think in the end, looking also at injuries, the Raiders will miss Shaver Sucks, free safety. He will definitely be out for the game. A strong safety is probable, but likely to play. But also on the D line, Marty Lyons will be questionable for the game. So 3 key pieces on defense that could or will miss the game, which could give the Bengals a slight edge to get beyond the pass defense and score a few points more than the Raiders. So right now, I would go for the Bengals. I mean, we're picking the favorite every time, but I think the Bengals are there for a reason. They had the toughest division in the AFC, and they can show why they won against the Steelers, the Browns, and also the Oilers in their division. Right now, I think they will be just a little bit too good for the Raiders. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders win it. That's just a testament to the great divisional matchups that we have. Really, really close games, I think, and wouldn't be surprised if any of the wildcard teams or teams that won the division but are not at seed 1 and 2 will win the game. Same here, but I think the Bengals have a slight edge over the Raiders.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the Raiders might win this one, and I think a couple of reasons. I think that they'll be able to shut down DeBerg on the passing side, which then should open up a bit of a gap for them because their offense is elite, and I think that might just give them the edge. That being said, I know the Bengals have a very, very good defensive unit, and they have proven that all season. But I just think the Raiders are a little bit sneaky good, is how I describe them, and I think that might just give them the edge. I think it's going to be close though. I mean, the line, as I said, mentions that they haven't played each other this season, so we could be talking apples and oranges because when these things clash, you never quite know. I'm going to go Raiders on this one. I think they might go through, and then I think we might be sitting here again on Super Bowl time, wondering how they managed to get there. I just think they might just have enough about them this year. But that's based on limited bit of evidence and a little bit of a hunch, I guess, a little bit of a gut feel for that one. But that's the way it works in the playoffs. You never quite know how things are going to pan out sometimes. And that brings us to our final divisional matchup, which is, of course, your Buffalo Bills up against the New England Patriots. The New England Patriots have certainly been one of the standout teams in the AFC this year. Incredible performances all around. No surprise, Steve Grogan has been phenomenal. 3,000 plus passing yards, 27 touchdowns. They've pretty much been a top 5 team in every respect of most areas of the game. Up against the current Super Bowl champions. So how are you breaking this one down? And give us your thoughts on how you are maybe looking at this going forward and what you respect about the Patriots.
Yeah, really, really great game. When we look at the records, these are the best 2 AFC teams. Of course, we talked a lot about the Raiders and Bengals and about their impressive seasons. But yeah, we have a divisional matchup here, Bills against the Patriots. Again, they played each other in last year's playoffs. And in this game, the Bills had a slight edge over the Patriots in a high-scoring game. And when you look at both teams' top 3 offenses, top 5 defenses, But when they play against each other, it's always a lot of points. Week 2, the Patriots won against the Bills 37-31 in Buffalo. And then we had week 11, where the Patriots got their only loss in 28-21 victory for the Bills. So both times the away team won. That will be a very interesting storyline. I hope, of course, that this stays true in the playoffs. But the Patriots played an impressive season. We already mentioned them a lot. Only one loss, but that loss was against the Bills. So I think it will be a very tough matchup for both teams. I expect a high-scoring game, a lot of passing by Steve Grogan, and hopefully Cliff Stout, if he can get back from his wild card downfall, basically. But I think right now, in the end, the Patriots will win it, in my opinion. I mean, I talked about Mark Gastineau, that he's out for the game, and that's just a huge factor for the defense and especially the pass rush. The Patriots are 9-7 against the Bills. I don't know the record for the past few years when the Bills were good, but it's always a tough matchup. As said last season, the Bills won in the playoffs, and for the last 2 or 3 seasons, we went 1-1 in the regular season. It's really a 50-50 game, but I think this time the Patriots will come on top of this game and beat the Buffalo Bills because Steve Grogan plays without any mistakes. I think that this could be a key factor. He had 3 interceptions in the year, but yeah, I think they will be able to get more yards against the Bills than the Steelers did. And this is what I'm expecting, a high-scoring game, heavily reliant on the passing game, with maybe a 34-31 or something like that for the Patriots. Maybe we get some overtime, but yeah, right now I think the Patriots are the better team and they won the division for a reason. Will be a close matchup though.
Yeah, I think it'll be. I think it'll be a close matchup, even with Gastineau out injured. I do think that might be the deciding factor, as you kind of alluded to. Really, it's hard to rule out the current champs, though. Even if Gastineau is out, there's still enough about the Bills to turn up and beat the Patriots. We've seen that in the season in terms of them being neck and neck. I could see this one going to overtime or being very, very close, like the Cardinals Giants game in that respect, being just the last play deciding it pretty much. But I'm going to go with the Bills, giving you've gone with the Patriots. Of course, you're going to go with the Patriots. I'm going to go with the Bills. I'm going to go with the current champions. But two Super Bowl winners up against each other, from a general manager perspective, is always interesting to kind of see. So, yeah. Tough one, a real tough one to call. Probably the toughest game of the playoffs and of the divisionals. I think we've got to look at. So that brings us to sort of the close in terms of the divisional games and matchups and what we think might happen. So I think just to recap ourselves a little bit, I think we kind of agree. New Orleans, Dallas. We're mixed on Buffalo, New England, and we're mixed on Oakland, Cincinnati. So we're pretty much in agreement on the NFC, Wobbegong, but the AFC, we have no idea what's going to happen, I think is what we're saying. But I'm going to put you on the spot here. Who do you see being in the Super Bowl? What 2 teams do you see being there? And then I'm not going to ask you who I think is going to win it all. We'll leave that. But just what NFC team do you think is coming through and what AFC team do you think is going to be there at the end of this?
Good question. I think my boring answer is Saints against the Patriots. And I think that would be a very fun Super Bowl to watch. They played against each other in the season. I think they have a good path to the Super Bowl and could win it. So I think right now it will be the Saints against the Patriots, but would of course not be compliant with my bold prediction that some team that did not win the Super Bowl yet will win it. So I think the alternative would be if we get a few surprises here and also in the championship game, I think we could see the Vikings playing the Bengals. I talked about the Vikings, that they're a sneaky good team, especially also on defense. So if they can win against Dallas and shut down the passing game, of the Saints or also the Cardinals, and then the Bengals maybe getting lucky against the Patriots. I think that could be another realistic matchup. So if you get a few surprises, it will be Vikings-Bengals. But right now, I would put my money on Saints against the Patriots. Just the best two teams in the regular season. They are here for a reason, and I think they will play a pretty dominant football.
Yeah, look, we'll see what happens. I mean, it's going to be interesting. I think any of the teams left are, even if any of them got to the Super Bowl, would be well deserved, I think, given the seasons that they've had. But we'll see what happens in the divisional games, and I'm sure we're going to be back with the Super Bowl live, and we'll be recapping some of these, I'm sure, at that point there. Which team has successfully navigated their path to the biggest game in the RFL at the end of the season. But Wobbegong, it's been great to have you on. Any final last comments before we hand it back to the RFL and see how these divisional games go?
Yeah, I mean, I won't let you go without hearing your prediction about the Super Bowl.
I'm gonna go. I would like to see, with respect to all the GMs left, I would like to see Minnesota, Oakland, or Cincinnati make it to the Super Bowl, or St. Louis. It would be the four that I would like to see. I'd like to see St. Louis from the perspective because Montana and Peyton getting to a Super Bowl would just be, I mean, that's the in my opinion, the picture one because they just haven't got there. And given the historic nature of those two players, Oakland and Cincinnati would be just interesting because they could be a bit of a Cinderella story. I think that coming out of this. Same with Minnesota. Everyone's writing Minnesota off, but who knows? You've got the perennial players: Dallas, New Orleans, Buffalo, Patriots, obviously the Bills as well. We all know what they've got. They're all the big name, big marquee names that have already sort of been there, done that. So I'd like to see one of those teams at least get to the Super Bowl. I think it'd just be interesting storylines from an RFL perspective. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens in the divisionals. But Wobbegong, great to have you back on. We'll be back come Super Bowl time.
Yeah, for sure. Good luck to all the teams. Really looking forward to that. Especially shout out to Shark, my opponent in the divisional round. Great respect for him and what he's doing in the regular season and also the past few years. Will be a great matchup. And yeah, we will talk in the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. Best of luck to all of the remaining teams in this playoff run.